I'd like to begin by just sharing, you know, as a Korean American adoptee, I was adopted when I was 15 months old by two white American, my adopted parents, and the lawyer gentleman, he said that he might be the oldest in the room. I might actually be the youngest. Is there anyone younger than 30 in the room? Oh, yeah, age is a race we can't outrun, right? Well, so I became interested in my identity, certainly, which I would suspect is why I do the research that I do. So here is some of the work I've done, and I say this to give you a background of where I'm coming from. My background also includes, I was formerly an early childhood teacher, and so prior to doctoral education, I was in the classroom just like many of you currently are. I knew I would leave at some point because sociology interested me more than the little children. However, I think it's important, this topic, to talk to you today about it, precisely because without understanding this phenomenon in a North American context, I think it robs you of, you know, an understanding of how history collides with modern day contemporary race relations, etc. And so it's with that context I begin today's talk. I've put together a website. I encourage you to check it out. The Model Minority Stereotype Project. While it's pulling up here, what you'll find there is just a host of resources all along the lines of Model Minority Stereotype. I say this because it's a wonderful resource. There's over 400 references, and it continues to grow each and every day. Just like the books around the tables that you've looked at, you may have selected a book already. This is a resource for your teaching and also your own learning. And so look at that while you're when you can. So who are we talking about when we talk about the model minority stereotype? Well, I'm drawing on Bimodal Lowell in 1999, and he says that you know, he uses this backslash between Asian and American, and that, as an adoptee, it's really hard, right? Am I Asian American? Am I Korean? How do we really identify? That's a political act. If I say I'm Korean, that's a political reason why I'm using that language, my nationality, our ethnicity, our race. And so today's talk, when I say Asian American, I'm using the slash as opposed to the hyphen, and it means pretty much everyone in this room, because you've already indicated you have some type of connection to Korea, Caribbean and Asia, and so that's where I'm coming from. So my remarks here aren't specifically directed to Korean Americans, although many of the examples I'll draw on are from Harvard, Yale, as well as Massachusetts area, Boston area. So let's begin. What is the stereotype? These bullet points are certain ways that people refer to the model minority stereotype. It really relies on circumstantial evidence. Supposedly it's positive, which at the end of today's lecture you should hopefully come away with understanding it's not so positive. It divides and conquers minority groups. Some people have called it a racial mascot. It's certainly a racial epithet, whether it's now, if Asians are considered geeks, historically they were gooks. And so how do we make sense of these labels? It homogenizes, certainly. It masks subgroup differentials, which we'll see. It's very hegemonic. It defies common sense in some ways. It's rhetorical. I say it's a bikini because it's suggestive, but what it conceals is very vital. So when you think of here, the red is the outward appearance. It's good, right? Asian Americans come from stable families. They're highly educated. They're prosperous. But beneath that bikini certainly is the problems, the areas that we don't really like to talk about. So it might be mental health issues. It might be stress. It might be poor outcomes that don't validate success, the success story. And lastly, it's a myth. I call it a stereotype because I think that's stronger language than a myth. Myth is very nice, like we read fairy tales and it was a myth, mythical things. I don't think it's really a myth per se as much as a stereotype. So when did it begin? Well, in January of 19... Can you hear this? I'm getting really... Is it all right if I just... can you hear me if I project? Okay. It's odd hearing myself, and I don't know. We'll try this. All right. I'll use my teacher voice. How about that?
Yeah.
All right. So in January of 1966, a gentleman, his name was William Peterson at Berkeley. He writes this story, and it was published in New York Times Magazine, right? And the title is Success Story, Japanese American Style. And in this story, he was commissioned to write it by the New York Times Magazine. He was commissioned to write it to talk about a successful group in America during the time. And so he picked Japanese Americans, right? Because they were interned, they were supposedly successful according to the indicators he set. But we have to ask the question, how? How was Peterson successful at beginning this story? Well, we have to understand there's always something before the story. There's a context before the story. And the context before the story, a year prior, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Secretary of Labor at the time, Assistant Secretary of Labor, he writes a report, The Negro Family, the Case for National Action. So the Moynihan report, as it's now commonly referred to as, really, unfortunately, blamed African Americans for their own plight, right? It was very much a problematic report. During the time it wasn't. Many of the mainstream folks endorsed it, but looking back, we certainly see, right, a culture of poverty doesn't exist. Blaming victims is not conscionable. And so there was a lot of problems. Why is it important to understand this? Well, it's important because of racial triangulation. In America, in the United States, in North America, there is a dichotomous racial understanding, whether it's black or white. And so where do Asians, Japanese, Koreans, where do they fit within this paradigm? Well, they're triangulated. So you notice here, whites are at the top, superior, and insiders simply mean they're American. They're viewed as loyal, patriotic. Then you go to the left, you have Asian Americans, which they're more superior than blacks, but they're foreigners. They're considered foreigners. It doesn't matter if you're ABC, an American-born Chinese. You, right, when people look at you, they construct you to be foreign, which we'll get to today. Meanwhile, blacks are the lowest on the racial hierarchy, but they're not deemed as outsiders, being disloyal or foreigners. Now, an important consideration is Peterson himself. right? Because he never uses the term model minority in that story. This is a quote taken from Daryl Hamamoto's book, Monitored Peril, Asian Americans and the Politics of TV Representation. And this is a direct quote. He says, and I quote, "Shortly after the publication of Negro Family, Professor William Peterson was asked by the editor of the New York Times Magazine to write an article on a distinct racial group that had also suffered past discrimination yet did not seem to be troubled by a breakdown in family life. The group happened to be Japanese Americans." Now, I bolded this because this is really important. Peterson himself admitted that he had little personal and absolutely no professional experience that qualified him to expound upon the subject matter, but he undertook the assignment nonetheless. Now, I'm glad all of you are here learning more, and you will be qualified more than others that are not here. So really encourage your colleagues and your peers to come to future programs put on by Dr. Kim, Dr. An, Sheila, and others, right? Now, there's a double bind here. Because the model minority stereotype is a discourse, right? And discourses really don't have a material aspect to them, right? It lacks physical proof of an ideology. That's where the circumstantial evidence can come from, right? We can cherry pick our examples. Oh, look at, got a Korean gentleman, he's at Harvard. Oh, he's smart. Did very well in the SAT, he's got a full ride. Oh, there's Jeremy Lin, excellent, economics major, Harvard. And we can overlook and neglect groups of people, of Asian Americans, who don't support this thesis. And it is very much a thesis. The argument and logic goes, right, A, B, C, and then you fill in what those are, and it's very linear, and it's very circumstantial. In the 80s, this is very much what the media projected about Asian Americans, right? Nothing unintentional about it. Stanford emblazoned on the hoodie or the sweatshirt. Notice even who they look like. They're East Asians as opposed to maybe South Asians. It's very intentional. Very intentional. You know, last week I was at DePaul University, same topic, model minority, and I was attempting, while I was preparing my slides today, to present new material in a different way, because typically professors can go on a lecture circuit and they can give the same lecture. That's problematic for a variety of reasons. One, if you ever look up a talker, a speaker on YouTube, and their lecture is the same, I mean, it's kind of, what's the point, right? So hopefully what I expose you today will foster some critical thinking. I really think the stereotype is very much old wine in new bottles. Jewish Americans were touted as being model minorities. But, right, you know, it's kind of two sides to that coin. They might be applauded as paragons for success, but they were treated as pariahs, right? They're stingy at that time, or they have these different stereotypical traits. But now the new wine, or the new bottle rather, is Asian Americans. And there are Asian Americans who really are endorsing, resurrecting, and re-invoking this. Have any of you read any of these stories or these books? I've read both. And in the first, it talks about tiger parenting. And Chua, she fails to talk about class in her book. You know, as a Yale endowed professor of law, the many privileges she had, and the very much, you know, at her high elite education, how that could be passed on to her children, right? And then in the newest book with her husband, who also I believe is an endowed law professor, talks about different cultural groups, Mormons, etc., Asian Americans, who are supposedly doing really well in the triple package. So the old wine and new bottles is important for us to consider. I was online maybe a few months ago, and you know how you know that advertisements, they do analytics, and they know when you're searching for certain things. So this came up, and I was like, what the heck is this? Harvard University not fair. Well, it's a website. It's a real website. Look it up. And I took this screenshot of it because I wondered, what image are they trying to convey to visitors of their website? You have an Asian American female on the left side, and it says, were you denied admission to Harvard? It may be because you're the wrong race. Right now there's this narrative, right, that Asians are model minorities, and the reason they're not getting into elite colleges and universities is precisely because of their success. It's their Achilles heel, supposedly. They're unidimensional violinists. They have tiger moms. They do what they have to. They're robots, very much. They lack personality. Well, clearly, hopefully, I mean, I have some personality. I'm not the most charismatic person, but I'm certainly not a violinist, right? And I certainly did not go to an elite college. But the message here is very clear and very political and very rhetorical. Now, as teachers, right, I want to make today's remarks applicable to your fields, your professional responsibilities and your personal interests. I have a colleague in Washington, in Seattle, and she emailed me a while back, and she said, Nicholas, you have to go online right now. Like, okay. And sure enough, the Washington School Principals Group, they had this problematic program, and it was PD, actually, believe it or not, professional development. And I want to show you a clip that I knew they'd take it down right away, so I saved it, right? That once it goes viral, you cannot get it back, right? So I took it. They did take the website down, but I have evidence I'm sharing with you. So you're going to see 3 white gentlemen in this video, and the program is get your black belt in technology. And so there's the motif of Asian American, but there's a problem with it. The problem is it's culturally insensitive, and it robs Asian people of their heritage, their language, their culture, and it orientalizes us. And I say us because all of us, we can use the us because we're all allies and we all want to learn. Doesn't matter if you're Korean by birth or what have you, right? Us. It's problematic for us. So here it is.
Hi, my name is Scott Steeman. I'm part of the AWSP Professional Development Team. Today we're coming to you live from the AWSP Dojo Center. We're doing this to remind you about our upcoming technology training on May 7th. As you can see, there's a need for principals to lead with technology, and this training is for you. On May 7th, you'll have the opportunity to come learn about some of the basic skills around using your smart technology. Or maybe you want to learn how to be more productive using things like Evernote. Maybe you're one of those principals that's always wanted to use Twitter to increase your communications to your school community or for your own professional development. Maybe you just need us. We only have 50 spots, and those spots are filling up fast. So you better get to our website right away and register for our technology workshop. See you on May 7th.
Now, the one problem, so to segue now with the next example, do any of you watch The Voice on television? Have you ever heard of that? Yeah. Okay, so I got some blanks there. It's like, what is The Voice? The Voice is, right, this competition of voices. Singers come, and there's famous professional singers who adjudicate, they judge the competition. And I was watching this, my wife and I love this show. We're not singers, we're not violinists. But I noticed something, and we watch it on our laptop, because NBC streams it. You can watch on your laptop. So I don't think you could do this with a television. At least I don't think Apple has created it yet. But I did a screenshot, and the screenshot is of a singer, Filipina, the second from the right, a young Filipina singer. And in the voice in the episodes, they oftentimes kind of give you context of a singer's life, like, oh, well, you know, something happened and inspired me to sing, etc. And in her story, she talks about her family, who are Filipina. And what I noticed was they had subtitles in English, but the women were speaking in English in an unintelligible way. I mean, it wasn't English that was hard to understand. It was fairly clear. In fact, I probably speak worse English at times, and I noticed, oh, this is fascinating, right? Why would they do that? Well, you fill in the reason why. I think we know possibly an explanation.
Was for deaf purposes.
No, I mean, well, if that were true, they would have to put subtitles for the whole. So I'm not saying closed captioning or anything, that's important. And
They wanted to point out she was foreigner.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Well, they do it on Honey Boo Boo also.
Okay.
They do, but they're hard to understand.
There, yeah, exactly. I've seen elements of Honey Boo Boo, wasn't familiar about the subtitles, but yeah, she was clear to understand.
Honey Boo Boo.
So here's it, yeah. So Jeremy Lin has been really sexy as a athlete, right? He has received a lot of media attention, Harvard education. He's a Christian, self-confessed, very open about his own identity. Taiwanese and the NBA. And here was a Ben & Jerry's ice cream flavor that actually the Ben & Jerry's in Cambridge, down by the university, I believe, was shared, and then they stopped. What was problematic with Tasteful Insanity were the ingredients. Can anyone guess what ingredients were in the ice cream?
Green tea.
Ginger?
Oh, good guess, not ginger. Fortune cookies, though, were in it, and lychee. And so we can see this essentializing, what does it mean to be Asian in America? Or for your students, Korean Americans, you know, when they're becoming more Americanized, they might reject Korean culture, which I would say is unfortunate, and we need to, right, continue identifying with our culture, but I can see reasons why youth reject it. I can see that. Here's an interview I want to show you that Jeremy Lin did with TJ Holmes for CNN. And these are the things I want you to look for. Everything but the ice cream. The bullet points here. And the dynamic interplay.
Belong. LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Jeremy Lin, Carmelo Anthony. You would probably say Jeremy Lin, but the name does belong. Everybody I named is a standout in the NBA, but Jeremy Lin is a standout for a different reason, because he is the only NBA player right now that also holds a Harvard degree. He is the first Harvard grad to play in the league in almost 60 years, also the first Asian American in about 60 years. You're seeing him right there, because last week he just picked up his diploma. Today, he's sitting here with me in studio. Jeremy, good to have you here, man. What was that moment like? You finally got to go back and pick up the diploma. How big of a deal? Was it a little more emotional than you thought it might be?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to be able to see it, 4 years of hard work in class, and just to be able to have my diploma. I mean, not a lot of people can say that they graduated from Harvard, and so for me, I'm the first in my family, so it was a big deal for me.
Okay, now it's a degree in economics, I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay, now the NBA is known notoriously for the trash talking that takes place. Now, throughout this season, maybe even some of the guys you're playing against, even some of your teammates, what kind of things do they say about you and say to you knowing you're a Harvard grad?
Well, I just have to make sure I get everything right, and if I don't, I hear about it. So everyone makes fun of me about going there.
Now, how is the season going for you so far? Again, you're not a breakout star necessarily just yet. You're just getting going. But I guess, what do you anticipate down the road? Can you be a guy who has a long-term career in the NBA?
Yeah, you know, it's just right now it's being patient, working hard, and just going with the flow. Just being a rookie is pretty tough, and not always getting to play as much as you want. But I just think staying with it and working hard will be all right.
How tough was it at Harvard? I mean, it's known for being the premier academic institution in this country. The coursework's not easy. How did you do that? How did you balance that with basketball in school?
Well, you know.
Well, what is that about? What?
Just trying to stay focused.
Yeah.
Time management.
Sounds like it was tough, though.
It was tough. It was definitely tough. My first 2 years, I struggled a lot. Just trying to find out, you know, how much time I have for everything, and on the road trips, you know, taking 4 days off from school, that was pretty tough too.
Now, what did your parents emphasize with you when you're growing up? I assume certainly you got into Harvard, they certainly emphasized education, but at what point did they allow you to focus on that basketball a little more? Or did they discourage you from that basketball a little bit?
No, they encouraged me to do it, and I appreciate that a lot. And but in my house, it was always school first. Take care of your schoolwork, finish your homework, and you play as much basketball as you want. So that's kind of the philosophy that I tried to adopt in college as well.
Now, there are some numbers out that say fewer than, the Sports Illustrated put this out, 20%, I think the Players Union put this out, 20% hold their college degree in the NBA. And 60% are actually broke by the time they leave the NBA. Now, I'm not sure if you were familiar with those numbers, but what does that say to you about the kind of example you can set, not just for young people, but also maybe for some of your fellow NBA players about what they should be aspiring to?
Well, you know, I just try to be who my parents raised me to be, and me being a Christian, I just try to work hard in everything I do, and schoolwork is definitely one of those situations. And so I just try to be an inspiration to everybody.
Now, and you mentioned you're very religious. Right, so, okay, let me get this right. You're a Harvard grad playing in the NBA. You're very religious as well. You're the only Asian American in the past 60 years. Do you ever feel like, quite frankly, you don't fit in your environment? You kind of stand out. Those things aren't synonymous with the NBA, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely stand out for sure, and I know my story is very unique, but that's something that I embrace and I enjoy, and just this whole journey has been a blessing from God, and so for me to be here, I'm just taking it one day at a time and really enjoying it.
Why not more Asian Americans in the NBA?
I'm not sure. I think that there's multiple reasons for that, but I think there's going to be a lot more coming up in the next few years, and I just think basketball is growing within the Asian American community for sure.
10 years from now, last thing to you. 10 years from now, what's going to look better on your resume? Former NBA player, Harvard degree in economics.
I think the NBA player.
Really? Come on, you got a Harvard degree. Nobody has a Harvard degree. Well, some do, but still.
Yeah.
You're more proud of the NBA part on that resume, you think, than the Harvard degree in economics?
That's tough to say. That's putting me in a tough spot. I think I'm pretty proud of both.
Well, really, congratulations. I've been wanting to speak to you for a long time. It's a heck of an accomplishment, and it shows to really young people out there you can have an Ivy League education, you can make it to the NBA. So a great example you are setting. Thanks so much, and good luck to you the rest of the season. All right?
Thank you.
All right, Kieran.
But only if you're a smart.
Okay, so in that exchange, the overemphasis of the institution that he graduated, and also the dynamic interplay. I talked about racial triangulation. TJ Holmes, as an African-American interviewing, right, an Asian American, is really unique on mainstream media, news, television. As well as, I've heard in other interviews with him really talking about, I remember there was a time when they were emphasizing that, you know, Jeremy worked so hard for the league minimum. He wasn't a showboater. And that showboating was compared and contrasted with African-American players, like Carmelo Anthony, who wasn't a team player. Jeremy Lin's a very much team player, right? Which really supports this idea that, this Confucian idea that Asians are all really, they'll put others before themselves and very sacrificial, etc., etc. And the whole Christianity piece is an important facet to understand because especially Korean and Korea, which is quickly, I mean, I would say in many respects, has a very large influence of Korean. My biological father is a pastor in Korea at Yoido Full Gospel Church, largest church in the world. I mean, large, like 7 or 8 services. So it's really important to see that. I'm very much supportive of this Protestant work ethic, right? If you just work, try, you'll do well. Now let's return to the whole foreigner piece, right? This foreigner piece, because it's important. And here we have a Korean actor coming here to talk. This clip will show us this whole notion of perpetual foreigner syndrome.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Well, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. She's either Japanese or Korean. But I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place in my park. I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
No, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Captain! What's all this? Drop the bone into you. Let's go sporty. Double, toil and trouble. On the camp, beware Jack the Ripper. Bloody hell! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing. Weird? Must be a Korean thing.
Is that on YouTube?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Oh.
It's what kind of Asian are you?
Okay.
So if you find that. So this is a perennial problem. I want to share, before I explain this next slide, a real experience that happened 2 days ago, and I'm still processing it in terms of what action to take. I was picking up my middlemost child, Avery. She's 4, nearly 5. November is her birthday. And picking her up from preschool. And we were stopped at an intersection. Next to us was a big, large, yellow bus. I assume in Massachusetts, you have big school buses, yellow? Okay. And much higher than my Honda minivan. So the students were looking down, and my window was down because in normal that day it was very nice out. And I began to hear these very obscene, anti-Asian, racist comments coming my way, and I'm like, where is that coming from? And I look, and my daughter's in the back. She's like, Daddy, what are they yelling? And I'm like, sweetie, you don't need to know what they're yelling at. And I don't want to repeat what they said, but here are, and I looked at them, a bunch of mostly white boys that I could tell, probably middle school age, because middle schoolers get out earlier than the elementary. And they learned those comments. They learned them from someone. Society, their parents, they've heard them on television, music. And so those sentiments are pervasive. And in many respects, they're kind of permanent fixtures in American society. They're legalized, they're codified, they're socialized, and they're conditioned into our being. And here's a great example. Going back to Lynn, now this is 2 years ago, believe it or not, right? When ESPN was in the news for having this problematic caption below, right, on their website, chink in the armor. Jeremy must have had a bad day, bad game, and as we know, chink in the armor just simply means a weakness, right? But we know, going back to the epithet, chink is a very racialized term. It's not a term we should use for Asians. Now, people were talking about this. I said, guys, hold a minute. And the guys I'm referring to are my friends. Don't you remember in '98 when the similar thing happened? They're like, what happened? Well, on MSNBC's website, American beats out Flan. Now, it's problematic because Tara Lipinski, the blonde, short, white girl, she's deemed American. It's problematic that Michelle Kwan isn't, although she was born in California, right? Going back to the foreigners in our own land. As Asian Americans, this is something we have to combat. As I've shared about the bus experience with the boys, and never have I, honestly, at least to my knowledge, has that happened with younger kids. It certainly happened with older kids, older people who have made those ignorant comments. But for little children to have free license and total, right, not like, I'm just going to say it, it's really problematic. So I really think that within the classroom we need to be responsible and talk about language, proper and improper language. Next, I want to talk to you about the myth in terms of pseudoscience, because the myth is predicated on a lot of pseudoscience. Drapetomania. You may not have heard this term, but it was an illness. Supposedly it was a mental illness. American physician Samuel Cartwright in '51 that caused black slaves to free captivity. So basically his thesis was this. If a slave would run away from his master, the slave must be mentally insane. Going back to the hegemonic, I said the model minority myth is hegemonic because it defies common sense. Well, at the time, this was the thought in the medical field. I think it might have even been in the DSM. But why do I bring that up? Because it's absurd. Now we laugh at that. We say that's incredulous. But it wasn't incredulous at the time. So the model minority myth, as I'm sharing to you, certainly I'm pointing out, I'm picking salient examples, but it should be incredulous for us to buy into it. Now, there's no shortage of racist research in peer-reviewed journals that point to this. Philippe Rushton, Richard Lynn, the first article, the journal is Intelligence, believe it or not. The Journal of Intelligence. I didn't know a journal existed like that. Cranial size and IQ in Asian Americans from birth to 7. Basically, in that article says Asians have larger sized heads, and that's why they have more gray matter. You know, and I just poke fun at myself with my wife when I talk about my research. I'm like, honey, that's why I have a big head. She's like, but you're not that smart. I'm like, oh, God. Okay, you're right. But there's so many, right, faulty assumptions here. Phrenology, the study of head, has a very long history and problematic history, right? Physiognomy, the study of the face. Clearly also here you have an examination of Rushton's theory of difference in penis length and circumference. In this article, the researchers and the pseudoscientists really, they were looking at, and this was in the 90s and even earlier, but they would measure the genitalia of men. I mean, this is real. So if you're special ed, you need to know this eugenics history, right? And they said black men had large penis, small intelligence, Asian small penis, large intelligence, and men, of course, they're normal. They have normal intelligence, normal size penis. I'm like, oh, okay. Is that problematic? But we have to understand that those are codified in the discourse. I said the discourse, right? Discourse is there's no material to a discourse. So how do I make these allegations? Well, right here.
You guys notice how many Asians there are at this school? I mean, how do they all get so smart?
I don't know. Guess that's just the way God made them.
Gentlemen, I give you the Asian. Ooh. Compact, hairless, and fiercely intelligent. The penises, while tiny, are extremely efficient. We're projecting 10 billion within 5 years. Also, there'll be different varieties that will all hate each other for some reason.
Do they eat just like regular food?
No, the opposite.
So Family Guy, I don't watch that show, but really getting at, that penis joke. And there's so many, the bad driver, I mean, if you don't have to think long and hard, and there's a lot of stereotypes. Now, this is not to say that white people are not stereotypes, certainly blonde jokes and all those things, but it is to show and illustrate for us today that Asians are, they occupy a unique space within America, which it tends to be black and white. There's a nice TED Talk by the same title, The Danger of a Single Story, and you can overlay that TED Talk with what I'm saying here. The Christy Yamaguchi, what's Sports Illustrated trying to say with this whole notion of American dream? Is it to imply she isn't American, which she certainly is, she was born in California? Or is it to imply, she's a foreigner, but if you work hard enough, you can achieve the American dream? Look at, she worked hard and she's, an Olympic athlete. Well, the myth is predicated and it's built upon a foundation of meritocracy. The myth, the misbelief that in America, if you try hard enough, right, you can succeed. Well, yeah, I certainly am a proponent of effort, but we certainly cannot absolve and not look at structural impediments to people succeeding or not, right? And I think this is a concise history of black and white relations in the U.S. Here you have the guy trying to get up top, and then he's like, hey, I'm up there, can you help me? I'm sorry about being racist now. And he's like, well, why can't you help me? He's like, because that would be reverse discrimination. Right? But that's how affirmative action is looked at, right? Which is a topic we'll talk about today. Anyone watch Gran Torino, the movie, with Clint Eastwood? Okay. If you haven't, I really encourage you to check it out. It's pretty much one of the first movies that really brought Hmong Americans into Hollywood. Although, as you'll see in a moment, repeatedly used epithets. Now, I'm going to talk about epithets after we watch this. And I apologize, it's very coarse language. It might make you feel uncomfortable, so be prepared. If you need to leave the room, I totally understand.
Killed by America. Did you see the way he looked at the truck? Jeez. It's like race burner this, Jack burner that, How many swamp rats can you get in one room? And have some respect separated. Damn barbarians. What the hell did the Chinks have to move into this neighborhood for? I kept a bunch of jabbering gooks off of my lawn when we were in Korea, and 1,000 screaming gooks came across our line. We didn't call the police. Yeah, well, you shouldn't be hanging out with them. You should be hanging out with your own people, the other Hmongs. What is it? Jungle people wanting to be in the great throat.
Kill people.
What are all you fish heads looking at anyway? These gooks and I do my own spoiled, rotten family. Relax, separated. You're wrong, April. I know exactly what I'm talking about. You're letting Click Clack Ding Dong and Charlie Chan just walk out with Miss What's-Her-Face.
You mean you are?
Yeah, yum yum, yeah. Nice girl. Joseph and Mary, these Hmong brothers are like badgers. All you slopes are supposed to be good at math, right? You swamp rats, on the other hand, you just... Now listen to me, Zip. Now you listen, old man. Look, I'm just kidding, Zip. You get the wrong one, he's gonna blow your gook head right off. Now, come on, Zipperhead. We'll let the mix stay here. You want to kill that cousin of yours and the rest of those Zips? Take it out and shoot machine gun nest. Yeah, some scared little gook just like you. These swamp rats in there. Shut up, gook. Give me another beer, Dragon Lady.
So far we've kind of talked about the myth that they're all intelligent. Well, there's also stereotypes of women that, right, that they're comfort women, right, that they're exotified, they're sexualized, they're fetishized. And this is important because the repetition, media repeats this story, this discourse, and we are conditioned by it. This is just a few clips from Gran Torino. I didn't know what zipper head, where that came from. I looked online. I'm not a historian by training, and the only relationship I found to it was possibly coming from the idea in war, a tank running over someone's head, and then their head explodes and it looks like a zipper. Now, whatever it is, certainly it's not coming from a place of endearment or a good place. You know, the program, Agnes, Sheila, and MJ were talking about curriculum, right, being absent, and some of you have mentioned that. I'm writing a book with a history master's student whose area is Korean history. And we've analyzed, the book isn't out yet, but I'd love to send you all a copy. So at some point I'll get your emails when it comes out. I'll get you a copy. And it analyzes teacher curriculum manuals and current teacher curriculum manuals. And what we found in our analysis is you're absolutely right. Absence of history, nothing is taught really much in the K-12 curriculum-wise. Certainly Korean War, but it's very superficial. And it's very fascinating because we found a lot of evidence of stereotyping in the curriculum. Now, that's problematic because, especially in history, which is a difficult field to teach, many teachers rely on teacher manuals. Not you all, of course, because you're brilliant and you're engaged and you read a lot, but not everyone is a bibliomaniac like I'm sure many of us in the room are. What does the research tell us on the stereotype? I told you a website, 490 articles, books. Well, certainly the myth causes stress and can, not always, but it can, if internalized, cause people to feel compelled to succeed. Does anyone know who Eldo Kim was? Eldo Kim, anyone? Eldo Kim was a student at Harvard recently. This was in the Boston Globe, I believe. But he was Korean, and he fabricated a bomb threat. So it was a spring semester. He called it, or emailed in. Sorry, that's how the Cambridge police apprehended him. That there was a bomb in these various buildings. And one of the buildings he indicated was one of the rooms where he was going to take a test. Okay, now it's coming back. All right. I'm like, you guys are Massachusetts folk. I'm Central Illinois, Flatland. I'm like, well, so there's just one example, certainly, but mental health and just healthcare in general. I mean, think of the Virginia Tech shooting. Now, these are counter stories to the narrative, right, that school shootings happen and school violence is done by mostly middle-class white boys, right, when you think about it, that wear trench coats and are disenfranchised. Now, counter storytelling is certainly one method of diffusing the model minority stereotype, but the problem with counter storytelling, right, is no one wants to air their dirty laundry. So by me sharing stories of Koreans doing horrific things doesn't invalidate the stereotype, right? It just pushes back against the discourse, right? And the discourse suggests one thing, and I'm giving you a counter story. You have packets of information. Suicide was one of them in the articles that I suggested, and Sheila, thank you for printing those for everyone. It's very limiting, the stereotype, because if Asian Americans, Koreans, students are deemed to be X, we place them in the box as the violinists, the tiger parenting, and all that. What happens to the brilliant minds who want to become artists or don't want to pursue formal education, which is totally fine? What about the Korean kid who just wants to be a mechanic? He's good with his hands. Or what happens about the Korean who wants to, I don't know, be a DJ, a wedding DJ. I was just at a wedding. Wasn't a Korean DJer, but you know, I can imagine we'd all be dancing to Gangnam Style. It would be fabulous. Certainly the research points to us that all the groups within this homogeneous group that we call Asian aren't doing well. Here is educational attainment. On the right you have percentages, and the left you have percentages. Less than high school diploma, bachelor's degree or higher. You see subgroup differences, right? Some groups are doing better than others. 52.7%. Now this is a little dated in terms of the year of the data, but Koreans 52.7 on the higher end. This is just part of the story. We can't fall into the single story, right? What about earning power? If model minorities are so good and they're so successful and prosperous, someone explain, I know it's small, if you can see it, someone explain to me what's going on here. Below you have education level. On the leftmost column you have earning income. And then on the right there's a key. Asian American women, Asian American men, white American women, white American men. Well, if I could go back and change my race and keep my gender, I would say I want to come back as a white guy because I would be making a lot more money on average with my PhD, right? $121,000, that's good money. I don't even make half of that. There, you know how much money I make. But here, you can laugh at that. That's the best material I have all day. Okay.
You're only 30.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm trying to build that repertoire. The Asian American men doing relatively better than other groups, but not there's not parity here. In fact, a recent article was published in which the researchers, some researchers at the University of Texas at Austin, looked at the low end of the distribution, uneducated Asian American men, and they found that they receive much, much less money than white men with a similar low level of education. So what does that tell me? At least it tells me that certainly there's a glass ceiling. There might be a sticky floor preventing people from rising. Some people call it the bamboo ceiling for Asian Americans. Certainly tells me affirmative action is still necessary. Equal opportunity is important. And what about this? Most people think that Asian Americans are on this high end in terms of wealth, education, and achievement. But we know the data tells us a different story. It's a bimodal distribution. It doesn't follow a normal curve, and that there are two modes. There's a large group at the low end, and there's a large group at the top end. And those are important to consider because when you're in the classroom, if you're talking about a refugee student or a sheltered English, an ELL, bilingual, heritage language learner, they have different and unique needs. And we need to think of them as individual people rather than as a model minority. Now I know some of us like Starbucks. I know Dr. An this morning, she had a Starbucks coffee. What would happen if Dr. An went to her Starbucks and this happened to her? How do you think she would feel? Well, let me just reply by saying she wouldn't feel good. You know. So these cases have happened. And they're not just at Starbucks, clearly. It could happen at any coffee shop, and it can happen at different places of where you're a patron as an Asian American person, right? Chinky eyes, going back to the epithet, doesn't make us feel like we're Americans. It makes us feel like we're othered. And othering happens in your classroom on a day-to-day basis. When children look at the bookshelves and see only, right, white authors, they don't feel like they're appreciated. When you know nothing about their culture, they don't feel appreciated, right? And they certainly do not feel appreciated when you mix in teriyaki and dough, like all of these things. It's like an Asian fusion. Have you noticed that? If you ever go to an Asian restaurant or a Korean restaurant, you can tell immediately if who's cooking the food, because if the ingredients aren't traditionally ingredients, right? If cilantro is in when it shouldn't be, then you know that there is a homogenizing going on, right? So school children, whether it be early childhood or your soon-to-graduate high schoolers, they need to see themselves represented. I think of it as a window and a mirror. The curriculum should reflect their reality, and it should be used as a window to see possibility, right? Two functions. Now, I said Starbucks is not, do you have Papa John's in this area? Pizza?
A little bit.
A little bit? That's another thing we have in Normal. Papa John's. And here in New York, some people got their pizza and their receipt said Ching Chong Lady Chinky Eyes. Again, another example. Racist receipts happen not only to Asian people, certainly black people, Hispanic, Latino people, but these are examples I'm trying to point out that the reality, and many of us in the room may have, unfortunately, had personal encounters with this, like I said, with the school bus example. During the introduction, it was made known that I live in Bloomington Normal. It's a twin city, but it's not as large as Minneapolis, St. Paul. But Bloomington Normal is close to a city called Pekin. And Pekin, Illinois, up until like the 80s, they were known as the Pekin Chinks. The school mascot was this. Now, I know mascots are receiving and have received a lot of attention, right? Whether it be professional or collegiate. So, the Braves, the Indians, what are some other?
I bet the Devil Rays, now they're called the Rays.
The Redskins.
Oh, really? The Devil
That's
Rays?
a religious thing.
Okay, Devil Rays. Who are
Redskins.
Redskins. So you all know where I'm coming from. I think there was the Fighting Sioux for Native Americans.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't
Yeah.
change it. I'm not sure.
Brookline High School used to have an Indian head as a mascot on all of the uniforms.
Okay.
In the 70s.
So you know where I'm coming from here, right? Pekin Chinks, class of 71. They actually sell T-shirts in this town still. They're proud of this heritage, supposedly. It was a sundown town. Much of central Illinois was a sundown town, right?
What does that mean?
Well, if you're black, you need to leave when the sun came down. You need to be out. Yeah. So there's a long history of anti-black and anti-Asian racism where I'm coming from. Now, here's from a newspaper, and it's actually, it's so old they changed. Right now, I believe our newspaper is called the Pantograph, but here it's the Daily Pantograph. But in the 80s, this is an actual, I found it from Xerox. Now I feel bad for the old people when you had to do all the computing with microfiche. I'm used to the computer, so you got to go to microfiche. I said, what the hell is that? So I got it from the microfiche, so apologize for the clarity. But this is from the newspaper of that time in 80, 3 years before I was born, right? That these students were outraged that they would change the name. They wanted to say the Chinks, right? And you have here, it said, more than 100 students gathered in a parking lot near the school chanting and waving placards saying, Pekin Chinks, dragons stink, because they were going to change from the Pekin Chinks to the Pekin Dragons. So people were holding tight to this mascot because, well, I guess they're proud of it, they liked it. Yeah, and part of me was too thinking, you know, is it because of, I don't know the people who created the school, but were they thinking like the Peking Peking chinks. Like, I'm like, if that's true, that's even worse yet. So I didn't know. But certainly, you go to your malls, you might have an Abercrombie and Fitch, I'm sure Hollister. You can see that there are stereotypes on the clothing we wear. Abercrombie and Fitch, Walk and Bull, Buddha Bash, Wong Brothers. These very, these very vile and repulsive stereotypes of people in rickshaws. I heard of it this way. In Frank Wu's book, he talks about someone who talked about walking their dog, but walking, W-O-K-I-N-G, like actually cooking your dog, right? That you eat dog. I mean, so it's very problematic. It's not, this is the other ugly side. Well, both sides are ugly, but the more overt side of the stereotype. What about in news reporting? I was in San Francisco, and then this flight, you heard about the nosedive it made, and the news reported the pilots' names. We too low, holy fuck, Captain something Wong, right? When I talked about this before, someone said, well, Dr. Hartlep, they were, in their haste, they wanted to be the first media outlet out with the names. So that's why the inaccuracy. And I said, excuse me, the associations of good journalism, they have procedures, right, to reduce harm, just like the Hippocratic Oath in medical fields, in law, professions, right, that have bylaws that say, right, protect the people in which you're informing, and this doesn't protect anyone, right, these names. This makes us feel that we do not belong, right? What about Google Apps? The Google apps, we talk nasty about Asians in so many ways. Make Me Asian app? Now, you know how I said about the Seattle, Washington School District, right? And how we talk to them. And going back to the school bus, I'm processing whether I talked to the superintendent about my incident. I know people have talked to Google about this, and there were protests because I was part of it. So this whole exotification is really problematic. I'm gonna steal, I know you were looking at this, but in this book, a lot of these issues are raised. If you, at the end, if you have a business card or a piece of paper, you write your name and your email, I'll just draw names and then I'll mail you a copy of the book, no charge, to the first couple. I can't afford everyone, but we talk about this problem of fetishizing, right? Asian Americans. It's insulting, really. What about this gentleman? This is really fascinating. Who got a tattoo? Have you seen tattoos? People have tattoos. I'm not judging if you have a tattoo or not, because personally I don't care. But where they tattoo Asian language on them, so it might be kanji or peace or love. I would suspect many of them don't know if that even says peace. It could say like, I'm ugly. Kind of like this guy. So one, whoever the tattoo parlor was in there, the tattoo artist, he was brave to tattoo something he knew was wrong, but he thought it said something, but it actually said something else. Right? Have you seen this tattoo? I saw this. I'll give you a moment to process this. I'm kidding. I've never seen an Asian woman with a tattoo on her or his arm that says something, right, like this. Why? Well, because it's absurd. There's no need to. But yet, there's kind of a double standard, isn't there? Somehow it's cool. You get you get a tattoo that says harmony. Okay, that's cool. Why? I don't know. Well, wouldn't it be cool for her to do the same? No. It's because the stereotype is unidirectional. Dominant groups, someone in the back, you use the language non-dominant. I appreciate that. That's great. That really shows where you're at as a person. I really applaud you for it. The dominant group does, right? And in some ways it's kind of like adoption. I think of as an adoptee, my white family adopted me. I adapted. I had to adapt, right? And so it wasn't the power and privilege and dominance came from my family who adopted me. I had no decision, you know. True, I was homeless with my father on the streets in Seoul, but still, right? I had no power over, you know, I'd like to maintain my family. Like, government, can you give us some money? Can you help? And so it's interesting to frame it and understand it in such a way. Asians have no choice. And there's a powerful chapter in that book talking about Korean women who work in nail salons. And there's a Seinfeld episode with Eileen where she goes in to get her nails done, and then she gets worried because she's like, oh, are they talking about me? Like, oh. Because prior to that, when she wasn't conscious of her actions, she was like, oh, I'm going to get my nails done, and it's lovely because I'm going to get pampered. And these Korean women love doing my nails, right? They service me. And the chapter about nail salons is really powerful because it really reveals the enormous lengths in which the Korean women made white women feel more comfortable. Whether that be not eating kimchi and not eating Korean food prior to going into work because they knew the sesame oil smell and the pepper smell would get to, the garlic would get to them. Whether it be to always smile, whether it would be to, you know, respond to holiday cards and stuff, right? Appease. It was very much appeasing these patrons, right? And we do know of these stereotypes that Asian women and men work in nail salons, whether it be Korean or Vietnamese. Certainly that's a stereotype that is problematic. I want to kind of leave the end time to engage in a more dialogue up until, I know the program, I believe we have enough time to interact with you. I want to hear your experiences for a variety of reasons, but certainly because you have knowledge that is great to share with others. And then if there's any questions I can respond to, certainly I'd like to get your emails and names, like I said, so I can send a couple books your way. And we can talk about our work as educators, because we all here are educators, and it seems like lifelong learners. So I'd love to learn from you. Hopefully you can learn something from me. So